Chief executive officers in the private sector will have to answer to why there is slow transformation in their companies. For the next 5 days, the Commission for Gender Equality will host public investigative hearings into this matter. To tell us more, we're joined by Dennis Matotoka, who is a legal researcher at the Commission. Tobela, good morning and welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning and welcome as well.
And thank you so much for coming through, Dennis. This is not the first kind of these hearings. You've previously had such, but you were focusing more on the public sector. You're looking into the private sector now. Why?
Yes. No, thank you. Well, previously we did focus on the public sector, and we have learned from the public sector that the issues of employment equity are often referred to as a human resource competency rather than the institution's priority. Now, we therefore resolved to focus much on the public sector, on the private sector, with the sole objective of assessing the impact of Employment Equity Act, to assess the measures that have been put in place by the institutions to promote women within their own respective institutions, but also to ensure that accounting officers are accountable for transformation within their own respective workplaces. We draw inspiration from the maxim that says delegare delegares non potest, that says the delegated cannot delegate. That is the rationale behind bringing accounting officers, because in terms of the Employment Equity Act, they are the ones who should be focused more on transformation in their respective workplaces.
All right, just before we jump onto the hearings to take place today, let's just compare the two, the public sector as well as the private sector. Which one is actually coming out? And
well, from the previous hearings, we have learned that there appears to be more progress in the public sector than in the private sector. The public sector has actually progressed in terms of ensuring that they have employment equity plans, to ensure that they have sexual harassment policies in place, to ensure that their employment equity forums are actually effective in ensuring that there are clear measures that sees women escalated to senior management positions, clear measures that are also seen that persons with disability are also moved from administrative positions to senior management positions. That appeared to be a bit of a challenge when compared to the private sector. There's still a lot of resistance from the private sector, hence our decision to focus on them, to work with them, to highlight this legislation that mandates accounting officers to consider transformation as a whole.
Yeah, because I wanted to ask, who shot the guy with the private sector? What is still lacking?
Commitment. There is a lack of commitment. There is lack of understanding of policies. There's lack of understanding of legislation. There's lack of understanding of international commitments that South Africa has made. Now, because of that lack of understanding, there's a lack of progress, and we are hoping that throughout these hearings we'll be highlighting these issues so that commitment can be made.
All right, let's talk about the skills. Do women possess efficient skills to climb up the ladder, the corporate ladder? Especially in the private sector.
100%. Women in the same category as men are competent. We do have women that have the necessary skills and knowledge, but because of the systematic structures that have been put in the private sector, mind you, not all private institutions, but some private institutions, women are unable to go to higher senior management positions because there's still a reluctance to transform these institutions.
All right, so what happens after those investigative hearings?
What we will do, we will draft a report, and then thereafter we'll make a follow-up. Mind you, in terms of the hearings, we'll have recommendations and findings, and thereafter we'll make a follow-up hearing to ensure that our discussions at the hearings are not futile, so that the entities can prioritize and ensure that there is adequate compliance.
So you can only go as far as making recommendations?
We'll make recommendations and then submit our report to the National Assembly.
Does it really help when Dennis? Because agenda commission because that's as far as you can go and make recommendations and compile reports.
Not precisely. We draw our mandate from the Commission for Gender Equality that gives us specific powers if there is a resistance from an entity. We can issue a notice to appear. If you do not adhere to that notice to appear, we issue a warrant of arrest can be issued in that regard. But also, we are not, as we're saying, an all-head and no-cattle institution. I mean, we do have complaints recently in the private sector where an employee is denied breastfeeding breaks. We have intervened in that matter, and the complainant is satisfied. So it's not just about recommendations. We do have teeth as an institution, and we do ensure that our mandate is fully understood.
All right, and I'm looking at the list of the companies that will be appearing before the commission today. You have the likes of Mercedes-Benz, Pick n Pay, and Rhodes Food Group. Talk to us about the selection thereof.
Yes, thank you. Well, firstly, the selection is not based on the complaints that have been lodged. We have ensured that all the sectors are represented in terms of the entities that are appearing from today until Friday. So we look into the agricultural sectors, we ensure that the motor industry is also well represented, builders institutions as well are also represented. So we want to ensure that at least we can have a sense of what is happening per industry in terms of what is the hearings about this week.
One other factor that I also wanted to touch on is the culture of fronting. I mean, we know in many companies where they put female or women as managers, but they're not really managers. So do you also come across such cases?
Indeed. In fact, this is also attested by the employment equity plans. What is so sui generis about our hearings is that we not only look into the statistics that there is a woman, there is a person with disability, but we go beyond that. We evaluate the employment equity plans, we look into the numerical targets to see if indeed it's practical in terms of what has previously happened with the previous employment equity plans. We evaluate that and we ensure that persons that have been put there, it's in terms of the Employment Equity Act that also accords with the values and principles of the Constitution. So we don't want a situation where people are just being put there for the sake of glory.
But the responsibility is totally different.
We want women and persons with disability to escalate to these positions because of their competence.
All right, quite an interesting one. I believe we'll be able to speak to you post the hearings, but thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. There you have it. That's Dennis Matotoka, who is a legal researcher from the Commission for Gender Equality. We're taking a break.